observed the woman and the police officer exited the room. The twins quietly sat at the table, staring out the window, almost as if they were waiting to see someone. I was still on edge since seeing the dead body, so I slid under the door and went out the front door. I made a mental note of the location of the building and started walking. I thought about what happened a few hours ago. I just called the police on the twins' uncle. Where were they going to live now? They must be so confused about everything. They have already lost their dad, friends, and watched kids from their school go missing. Everything must be making them so scared. I couldn't help but feel responsible for everything. I was supposed to protect people, but instead I just screwed around. I walked for hours. By the time I finally stopped to take a break, it was already sunset. I sat on the sidewalk, letting my mind wander. Did I fail? Did I fail as a protector? Of course I did. No good protector lets all those people die in a week or two. I turned around and realized where I was. I was in front of the forest. The night sky was devoid of any stars, so the forest gave off an eerie feeling. I knew that I should have went back to watch over the kids, but something drew me to the forest. Hesitantly, I stepped into the forest and started walking. After a few hours of walking, I decided to change back to my real form. I switched back to my true form and started walking, occasionally getting hit with a branch. I walked for what felt like hours, staring ahead of me. The branches of the trees occasionally scratched me, and occasionally left a cut somewhere on my body. I couldn't see anything. There was nothing to illuminate the path in front of me. No moon, no stars, nothing. There was one thing I've noticed. The deeper I went into the woods, the colder it got. I walked for a mile or so until I came across a car. The car looked like it was abandoned. It was in really tough shape and there was nothing in the car that could have helped me return it to its original owner. Reluctantly, I crammed myself into the driver's seat and turned it on. I was extremely lucky that the car still ran. I somewhat knew how to drive from watching the twins' uncle drive, so I pressed on the brake and started driving. The air started to get colder the deeper I went into the forest. I was in an uncomfortable position, so it was hard for me to keep an eye on the road. It started getting foggy, so I turned on the lights in front of the car. I tried turning on the radio. I've seen it done before on TV, so I knew how to do it. Classical music is my favorite genre of music, and it was way too quiet, and I was starting to feel scared. But all I got was static when I turned it on. I drove into the woods and I heard movement through the trees. I silently hoped it was just wild animals running around. I kept my focus on the road, hoping that the cold would go away. As I drove deeper into the woods, I started thinking some bad thoughts. I started hearing voices in my head telling me to do bad things. "Drive the car off the road," one voice said. I tried ignoring them, thinking that it was just what humans like to call intrusive thoughts. The movement in the woods became more audible, creeping me out even more. I drove for about 5 minutes or so until I saw something. In the corner of my eye, I saw a human with a monster. The human's eyes were bulging out, and he had a wide smile on his face. He had black hair and was wearing a green plaid button-up shirt. He was wearing jeans and shiny black shoes. The monster looked to be one of those furry monsters. Their fur was dark grey, and it looked like it hadn't been washed in years. The monster stared at me with no emotion anywhere on its face. I noticed the human hadn't blinked once. I immediately looked away and put my focus back on the road. I drove for a minute or so, but I started hearing someone's whispering in my ear. I felt their breath in my ear, but I didn't look. Whoever they were, I didn't want to know. I felt them shake violently in the car seat. I refused to look behind. I kept my focus on the road, ignoring the sinking feeling in my chest. The air started to get colder and colder. I turned on the heat. It helped a little bit, but not much. I still felt the person or things present in the back seat. I didn't look. I was really starting to miss the twins. I just wanted to go back near them. I just wanted to be near them. I loved them so much. I hadn't slept last night, so I was really sleepy. I checked the time. It was 12:07 a.m. After a few minutes of driving, a monster ran into the road. It looked to be a baby shadow monster. I grabbed the steering wheel to avoid it, but the thing in the back seat grabbed it first and turned the car to where it was driving towards the monster. I started freaking out. I tried to yank the hand off the steering wheel, but it was no use. The hands held firmly on the wheel. When the car was in front of the monster, I looked away. I didn't want to look. I heard roaring, so I looked up. The monster grew into a 13-foot tall monster, and it started screeching and stomping on the road. I started screaming too, out of fear. I was terrified for the monster. Did it get injured? The thing took its hand off the steering wheel, and I checked the shadow monster for any injuries. Luckily, there were none that I could see. The shadow monster screeched while running back into the woods, and I felt the thing's presence leave the back seat. I blinked back tears and started driving again. I drove until I saw something move. I exited the vehicle and noticed that it was in worse condition than before. I took a deep breath and started walking. While walking, I thought of the twins, or the mystery I was so determined to solve, of what happened while I was driving. I was so close to solving the mystery, but was it worth it? I walked ahead for an hour or so, until I heard chanting. I stopped dead in my tracks, frozen in fear. Reluctantly, I stepped forward and saw what would haunt my nightmares for the rest of my life. Humans and monsters were in a circle, chanting in some weird language. A human child was tied to a piece of wood above a fire. What fueled the fire was the human and monster guts. The boy was screaming and crying, screaming for their mother. A pile of rotting, dead bodies was right next to one of the people in the circle. Upon closer inspection, I noticed the twins' dad and Andrew's friends. Their dead bodies rotted in the pile, along with the other humans and monsters. I let out a high-pitched screech and charged forward. I don't know what happened in those few minutes, since I was blinded with rage. All that I remember was that I was standing in the middle of a dozen bodies a few minutes later, both human and monster. I was covered head to toe in blood, both from human and monster. I was still high on adrenaline, but I took a cautious step forward towards the boy, who was now sobbing. I raised my hands up to show that I wasn't going to hurt him. I carefully untied the boy. The boy, terrified, ran away from the scene. I then turned my focus towards those monsters. "Why?" I screamed at the bodies. "Why did you do this? The kid is a living being." I screamed at the top of my lungs. I stomped one of their heads and fled the scene. How could humanity let something like this happen to their own kind? How could monsters take part in something so horrible? I ran for what felt like hours, until I saw human and monster footprints from that human and monster I saw earlier. I started kicking the dirt, destroying the footprints. After a minute, there was no footprints. Still, I kept kicking the dirt. Out of rage, I punched a tree but yelled in pain. The tree shook a bit, sticks raining on the ground. I grabbed a stick and started scratching myself until I started bleeding. I hated myself for doing what I promised myself I would never do. Hurting another living being. All my life, I loved humanity. I believed that people could become better people. I believed that there was good in everyone. All my life, I was looking at humanity through rose-colored glasses. Why would you fucking let this happen? I screamed, tears rolling down my face. At humanity, at the monsters, at myself. I threw the stick in a random direction and started running. I ran for another hour or so, until I found the car. I entered the vehicle and started the car, right when I heard the police sirens. My little bunyips, that is all from Mr. Villyn today. Liking the video and subscribing to the channel helps tell YouTube that you're liking my content and want to see more of it. Clicking the notification bell will keep you up to date with my videos and notify you whenever I upload. You can also dislike the video if you want, but doing that might be hazardous to your health.